My name is Eric.
Hello, my name is Nico.
And today we're going to present how the statistics allow us to generalize about individuals from a population.
Our variables are the wrist circumference in centimeters and the length in centimeters from the elbow to the shoulder.
Here are our measurements. The frequency table was used to calculate the mean, median, and mode. The bar graph represents the average of the LL and UN and the frequency. The pie chart represents the proportional quantity of the results. For the wrist, on the other side, for the elbow to shoulders, it represents the same. The frequency table was used to calculate the mean, median, and mode. The bar graph represents the average of the LL and UL and the frequency, and the pie chart represents the proportional quantity of the results, both of these graphs in a visual representation.
After this, we calculated the position median, which was 12. For the interpretation, 50% of the students have a smaller wrist than 17 centimeters, and 50% of the students have a bigger wrist than 17 centimeters. The most common wrist length was 17 centimeters. The average wrist length of male was 17.06 centimeters. For the boxing whisker plot, the minimum was 14 centimeters, quartile 1 was 16 centimeters, quartile 2, the median was 17 centimeters, quartile 3 was 18.5 centimeters, and maximum was 20 centimeters. For the interquartile range, we got 2.5. For the length between their elbows and shoulders, the position median was still 12. The interpretation, 50% of the male 11th grade students have a smaller length between their elbows and shoulders than 33.5 centimeters. 50% of the students have a bigger length between their shoulders and elbow than 33.5 centimeters. The most common length was 37 centimeters. The average length between their elbows and shoulders was 33.5 centimeters. For the wrist, the percentage is the 35% of the length is 16 centimeters. The 65% of the length is 17.5 centimeters. The interpretation of the percentiles is that 35% of the male 11th graders have a smaller wrist than 16 centimeters. 65% of the male 11th graders have a bigger wrist than 17.5 centimeters. The interpretation of the smooth curve is that in the smooth curve, we can see that 35% of the students have a length below or 16 centimeters. In the smooth curve, we can see also that 65% of the length are below or the same as 17.5 centimeters. For the elbow to shoulder, the 34% of the length between the shoulder and elbow is 32 centimeters. That 65% of the length between the shoulder and elbow was 34.5 centimeters. The interpretation of the percentiles is that 35% of the students have a smaller length between their elbows and shoulders than 32 centimeters. 65% of the students have a bigger length between their elbows and shoulders than 34.5 centimeters. The interpretation of the smooth curve is that 35% of the students have a smaller length or the same length of 32 centimeters. 65% of the students have a smaller or the same length of 34.5 centimeters.